Welcome to the TeleClass call regarding the turner versus a loader when making compost session. This is Edwin Blosser speaking, and would like to introduce our guest speaker as well, Nelson Furtado out of California, Salon, California. And Nelson, are you there?
Yes, sir. Hello, everybody.
Thank you, Nelson, for joining us. One of the things that I would like to note for everybody's benefit, look, there's an awful lot of people in our industry of composting that actually use front-end loaders to make compost. In fact, if you look at the statistics nationwide, that is by far the largest percentage of compost operations out there. And so we are looking at having a very special guest who has firsthand been operating with front-end loaders and has gone to a compost turner. And Nelson, I'll be asking you some questions here in a moment. But thank you for joining us. And so I will now get started here. Folks, it is an advantage to have your time on the call. I do consider that a significant privilege. As we are looking at comparing these features, we will then open it up for some questions. But listen, I would like to kind of start down this pathway that decomposition is the part of composting. And so let me just start out by laying out this part. When things grow, they compose. And that means that cell by cell, organic matter, whether it's plants or trees or of any kind of growing thing, one cell forms and another one cell forms on top of it. That's composing. When you reverse that, you're making compost, you're decomposing. So it's the opposite of growing. So compost is the opposite of growing. And so if you start down this path of comparing using a loader versus using a front-end loader versus a compost turner, we will go down through a couple things that just really make a difference in where we're headed. When you look at, for example, I'm going to be doing some comparison where we're going to go through several steps, several aspects of it. If we're looking at the cycle, the front-end loader with an 8-yard bucket loader is often typically quite a bit longer, and we'll have Nelson talk about that later. But I'm going to say it varies from about 6 months to 18 months using a loader. And with the composting cycle of a compost turner, particularly an Aeromaster compost turner, and we would say that's the reason that, yes, we do manufacture that turner, but we specifically manufacture that turner to have an individual particle control. That allows us to make this confident statement of saying our cycle can be finished in 8 to 10 weeks or less. And so that's kind of where we're at. And secondly, the loader is designed for lifting, moving, and dumping. The compost turner is designed for mixing things up. Some turners are out there not designed to handle every particle, but they are designed to thrash it around and sort of be almost like a beater / grinder and a turner. We don't want to do that because we want the particles to absolutely aerate, biologically decompose, and end up with a beneficial product for the farmer in the end. It's not about doing it mechanically. It's about providing an environment that microbially gets the job done. And so that we have designed the turner for that purpose of mixing, blending, aerating, and watering. We can handle every particle with the oxygenation, with the moisturization, with the blending and mixing, because as it decomposes, you're going to have more materials that come apart. And so one piece of material becomes 100, and those 100 become 1,000,000, and so on. That process of decomposition makes so that requires it to be mixed thoroughly. And when you have a loader bucket, you don't do that. You just simply take one bucket, and even though you may dump it slowly and so on and so forth, it is time-consuming with doing a lot lesser job than what you need to do for biological purposes. Secondly, aeration. Aeration is difficult to achieve, even with slow dumping, due to material hanging together while dropping to the ground. A fast dump presents oxygen and CO2 exchange, for example. With the Aeromaster turner, the oxygen and the carbon dioxide is achieved through all of the material as such. We've really had a lot of different aspects. In fact, before we get Nelson, I'll point out the factors that was also in your email that you got. Nelson had listed out some things that are pretty major. We'll have him talk about it. But fuel savings, labor savings, moisture in every particle, less overhead, being able to turn every particle. When you're screening your product, and he'll talk about that, he just has a lot less overs and a whole lot more efficiency. As a matter of fact, as we did the numbers relative to his operations and others, and certainly he was more efficient than some of the others that we had documented, but it was $42.20 lower per hour cost with 6 times more productivity with the PT-170X. And if we take up 1,500 hours of operation per year for both the loader and or the turner, the annual savings is over $60,000 a year, giving it over $300,000 of savings for 5 years, and yet produce 6 times more compost. And so your cost per yard or ton, depending on what you use to sell with, what increment you use, volume or rate, you're going to have a lot more there to sell, etc. And so when we look at that, there's a lot of different factors that play into this. And I will summarize a few things, and then I'll bring Nelson on, and then we'll have some questions. But let me summarize a couple things. We know, for example, all organic matter, as it decomposes and disintegrates, a lot of that inside stuff that's from the inside of the cell is volatile. Those pieces are extremely volatile. Now, when I say volatile, I'm serious about that. We're talking about it evaporating once it comes out. And we call that the sun energy that you lose. You lose that sun energy. And when you lose that sun energy that was inside the cell, no, I'm not talking about a physical part of it that's heavy. I'm talking about the individual sun energy. Why do I say that? Well, it is true that most of the growth comes from the environment, the sun, and so on and so forth. And so when we get back into this decomposition thing, you know, we're talking about it being critical to handle every particle. So now all of a sudden, you got a way to consistently make a difference for the customer, and that ends up increasing your business. And so, in summary, we've got to blend because of that. We've got to inoculate using an inoculant that causes the evaporated materials to be grabbed onto. This inoculant that we have, the first step, is not about making it compost. It's not a compost starter, but it is something that captures those ionic tiny pieces that are lighter than air. Just like helium gas in a helium balloon wants to go up, so does this lighter than air material that wants to come out of every cell. And this first inoculant, called nutrient converter, or N converter for short, this inoculant is designed to push out an enzyme that produces a negative ionic charge. This takes the positive volatile compounds coming out of organic matter cells, and it immediately attaches it to it, so you don't evaporate. We've got to have an inoculant that keeps our goodies in the windrow, and that really ends up becoming a valuable source for our customers. We've got to be able to water every particle in the visit. We've got to be able to move the material around so that everything touches everything else. We've got that, as I mentioned, the inoculant, the amount of space that you can serve because you have a faster turnover, the uniformity and the frequency. These are all very critical factors that really make a difference. And so when I kind of lay that out, we'll kind of start our discussion with Nelson here. And as I think about it, as we start in this, Nelson, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Thank you, Nelson, for joining us on the call. We're going to introduce you again for those that have not joined us until a little bit ago. Nelson Furtado is out of Escalon, California. And Nelson, would you describe your operation first a little bit?
Yes, I'm mainly a manure composter. We do definitely have green waste. I'm in the belt of California of almonds, walnuts, pistachios, and wine grapes, known as a specialty crop. That's kind of more or less my realm of who I sell my end product to, and started doing the whole composting adventure back in 2013, and I've always used manure, and manure is kind of, there's organic matter in regular compost, but manure you get more nutrients, and that's kind of what I do, is the manure-based compost with some green waste.
Very good. Thank you so much. And would you relate to our audience how many different composting sites that you operate out of?
Yes, I have 5 different sites. Obviously, growing this compost in California, when I first started, it really wasn't sought after. But obviously, with our droughts and sustainability, agriculture being the new thriving situation in California, with our drought and water usage and trying to cut back a lot of the chemicals, the organic world here has really taken off. And I deal with, again, manures. I have 5 different sites. I deal right now about 60,000 yards, and that all is basically used in an agricultural setting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yes, I've actually visited your site last week, and I was very impressed with everything that's going on and the magnificent difference that you actually make for the customers, and so on and so forth. Would you mind giving us a little history of how you started and kind of what your tools of the trade was initially and so on, and advance up to the last 5 years of the operation using a front-end loader, etc.?
Yeah, so I started in 2013 on a very small scale. Again, it was a front loader, and I knew, obviously, there wasn't nearly, the internet now has progressed a lot with all the different types of emails and websites and YouTube and all that. I knew that I needed to get into a turner. I went ahead and made a purchase in 2014 of a turner made here in California, and at that time, it sounded like this was a big deal and it was perfect for my business. Well, fast forward as time went on, the turner, moisture was my biggest battle, and the row was too small. Obviously, basically going back to Edwin, you're decomposing, so you're working with science, breaking things down to where your pile ends up shrinking, and at the end of the day, moisture is a big part of that. Now, I was using a lot of water trucks. I even built a hydrant setup, 2-inch lines, drip lines. At the end of the day, that all adds to labor and inefficiency. And I was young, I was green, I was learning, getting my hands dirty. And then I ended up learning about, again, the internet and our ag show here in California, in Tulare. I learned about Midwest Biosystems, and I attended their workshops. Met Edwin in 2015, and I thought I knew a lot about compost at the time, but boy, did I learn a whole lot more once I attended the class and then created a relationship with Edwin and always, talking to him. And there's one benefit that I really liked of going to the workshop is I call it the compost Bible, but you always have something to refer to, and if you're ever second guessing yourself or a situation, troubleshooting, reassessing your area of what you need help with, you always refer to that. So that was a big plus. And then the following spring, I come home and I'm thinking humus compost. Well, California was a little behind on the compost technology, so a lot of people just looked at me as like, we just talk to our PCA, he tells us what to put on, and that's what we do. So fast forward to 16, I revisited again, went down there, and at that point, I knew that I needed to get a bigger turner. I was just struggling with the smaller turner, and at the time, Edwin was engineering something, and I was eager, but I needed to keep up with my demand, so I sold my turner, and I went 2 loaders. And when you get on the internet, at that time, everything was really heavily talked about composting and front-end loaders. So I fell into that one, and here I am. I have four loaders, and I'm operating with loaders, and I ended up calling Edwin, and the amount of fuel and the amount of labor it was just killing me. And I knew there had to be a better way. And I just kept wanting to get myself into a bigger turner. I demoed a Comprast turner. I demoed Vermeer, and I've gone and visited multiple sites, Scarab, and again, everything, it just looked like a big expense. Hydraulic oil. In the area I live in, it gets very hot. We can get to the 112s, 110s. This year's actually been fairly mild. But when you have hydraulics and you have a motor all in one compartment, you're going to have a lot of overheating issues. And then overheating leads to fires when you're dealing with, green wastes and different materials. So I was very skeptical about that. I didn't really want to take that. And obviously it's a big expense. It's a big purchase. It's not something that anybody can just get in overnight. So last year, the cost of fuel really, and labor as of now, I don't know where everybody is from that's listening to this, but right now diesel in our area, red dye, construction, ag use, we were almost to $6. We were in the mid 5s. And when you're running 4 loaders, 102 gallons, 110 gallons of machine, and every 14 hours you're putting it up, you can see my fuel bill is really killing me. And Edwin and I got to talking, and they have their 170X and their 190, and we ended up going with we have 2 170Xs, and we ended up going that avenue. They're easier to move. I don't compost on just one location, so being able to hook up and get on the road and move it was a big part of my operation. I needed it, and Edwin, obviously, with his fabricating side of the business, they were able to design a 170X for me, which the 170X, the X is for it to be able to be transportable, and I received my first machine in June, and we've talked more in the time from June to now than ever. I can't be more happy, more content with. The biggest thing is this is a business. We want to create an end product that's going to help the fellow farmer, which they're operating a business, to be more successful and be more profitable. And if I am profitable, they are profitable. And that is one of the biggest things. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I know you have other questions, but at the end of the day, I am now where I am now, and I'm able to be more successful due to a lot of it is this turner. It's just been a great thing to add to my business, and I'm saving more money than I thought I would be, especially in the time of now with prices of labor and fuel being so high.
Thank you so much for contributing, Nelson. I'd like to make a couple comments about right now. Some of our listeners are thinking, well, does Nelson work for Midwest Biosystems? And of course, it's not. And why is Nelson so passionate about what he has arrived. And I want to make a few comments. I do feel like over the years we have been a best-kept secret that has been just long buried in the minutia of all the information that's out there. And I do know that when I met with Nelson last year saying, hey, we got to get yourself situated so we can get this because I'm going to make you a whole lot more money. Sure, I was into selling a solution to do that. I would not hesitate to say that in the least. But I knew that Nelson's going to win a whole lot faster than I am. Nelson, there's always this initial comment that, hey, I got to have a loader anyway. Why don't I just first buy a loader? And when you stop and think about your screening capabilities, your final product, you and yourself know ultimately this drastic improvement on your bottom line and your final product and you get almost excited when you think about it. But can you talk about screening and the things that help in terms of the truck dumps out and your turner goes through it directly without a lot of loaders, all those thoughts there. Can you kind of touch briefly on that?
Absolutely. And to say something to those listeners, I farm over 2,000 acres. I have a composting business. I definitely don't work for Midwest Biosystems, but they have been an absolute help for my success to where I've gotten now. And going into what you guys, I just wanted to answer that. I definitely, I'm not a sales guy. I'm an everyday farmer, just like I'm sure a lot of you guys are composters. That's where I'm at. But going into what Edwin was just saying, the loader deal was the normal. It's very normal for you to think that because I fell into that. Get rid of the smaller turner. I have loaders. I need to load trucks. I need to load a screener. I need to blend material. And in my mindset was perfect. I'm going to get another loader. Well, with 4 loaders, it's very inefficient. And I didn't know that until I started using a Midwest Biosystem. And really, he makes various sizes. So I just continue to say Midwest because there's a lot of people that use skid steers, loaders, anything with a bucket on the front end. You're never going to get, and I'm telling you this confidently because I do it on a daily basis, you will never get the uniformity in your end product with an efficient cost behind it unless you're using a turner. And I've used other turners. Now, Edwin's turners are like the Cadillac of turners. You're in a tractor, you're turning a row. If you need water, there's a flip of a switch. There's no calling somebody. There's no getting out of the turner, stopping what you're doing. And again, when you're calling other people, there's more labor, there's more inefficiency to where you're in the tractor turning the row, you get a dry spot. You need more moisture. You flip a switch and you're inoculating or you're aerating or you're putting water into your row wherever it need be. That has been a big help for me. Then fast forward to the end product. When Edwin was talking about the 8 weeks to 10 weeks, you're processing your material, whether it's green waste, food, whatever it is you're composting. The biggest thing that's been my help was the turning and getting the cycle of compost shortened up. But bigger than anything, if you obviously operate compost and you're using a loader, when you're lifting wet material that you're trying to synchronize and get to where you need to be, and then you're dumping it, every time you shake that bucket and you're dumping it, the pins on your loader, there's wear and tear. Now you fast forward to a screener. I screen everything majority here at a 5/8 minus. Now, when you're putting material that's not as broke down, as fine, as aerated, you have a lot of stuff that, again, going back to compose and decompose, that has not decomposed. My screener, I run a screen machine, a 612T. It's on tracks. If you follow where I'm at, my business model is efficiency. My screener works tandem with the loader operator. He's got a remote control. It's on tracks. He can control everything with one person. And that makes it even more efficient when you have a compost that's gone through the Midwest turner, your end product, I've saved about 75%, which is, you may think, how did you do that? Well, get yourself a turner, run it about 5-7 times through a pile, and do a side-by-side pile with the turner, and I can guarantee you, because I do it myself every day, you will be very, very, very efficient compared to a loader. And at the end of the day, the faster you can make a material that's profitable for yourself, it's going to be profitable for the farmer and to meet the farmer's needs in that window of time. And where I farm here, we are harvesting now, and with the pistachios, almonds, walnuts, and grapes, everything typically happens in a 90-day period, starting middle of August to pretty much October. So with that being said, everybody wants compost from October to the rain season, which is typically, give or plus or minus our weather, December. So if you can imagine, when I tell you 60,000 yards, I have a very short window to have that prepared, ready, and delivered. And I can't say again, I wouldn't be able to fulfill that doing it with loaders. I have, but I've worked a lot of long hours, paid a lot of overtime, spent a lot of money in fuel, and now I finally have found the secret that I, like Edwin saying, it's Midwest is a hidden gem, and I'm so happy that I've gotten to know Edwin. I've gotten to know his family, going to the workshops, eating supper with them, and the whole family of the Midwest Biosystems have helped me get to where I'm at, and I look forward to continue to grow the relationship.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We're running out of time, but we'll have just one more comment from you, Nelson, and then we'll open it up for one question only. Because of the sake of time, we can be on the call longer as we need to be off of the recording, but talk about fuel. Just simply talk about fuel and compared to when you got started in June and the amount of the reduction in your fuel usage. You kept rejoicing about that last week. Would you just refer to that briefly?
Yes. So with fuel, on a weekly basis, I was burning through about 1,000 to 1,200 gallons. And since I took possession of the turners, all this new technology in these tractors, it literally will tell you how much you're burning. And I have a 1,000 spline PTO. I'm running the 170X, and I am burning fuel as from 4.8 gallons an hour to 6. And what varies that is obviously your PTO speed, the material, the wetness, the heaviness, depending on what you're doing. But I would say average about 5 gallons, and that's one machine, not four. Not four loaders, one turner, one tractor. If you put both of them running, times that by 2, and that's what you're getting. So, big dramatic change. And I know a lot of people, because I was one of them, something that I want to make sure I state, you're going to look at the purchase cost of a turner. And I know Edwin mentioned about it. And I got hung up on that a lot as well. But you can't look at the initial upfront purchase. You got to look at the longevity of it's a business investment, and most importantly, it's an investment that's going to give you a return. And a lot of people think, well, and how does iron give you a return? Because typically you buy a piece of equipment and it depreciates. Well, it's the material you're making with it. You're doing it in a lot faster cycle, a more uniform cycle, and at the end of the day, it's a better material in general.
I do really appreciate that, and I'm glad that you've reinforced that. There are so many people that do not realize that most compost turners cost enough more in 5 years in operation that ends up paying for our machine alone in the savings of the cost of 5 years owning it initially. And so, yes, they do get hung up on the fact that our prices are higher to buy it, but our costs at the end of 5 years literally have been shown to be 50 and 75% lower total money output at the end of 5 years than our competition in some of the other compost turners. Now we're made a comment not just about front-end loaders, which is very high in cost, but also just simply competitive machines that are not designed to be turned with as little horsepower as the Aeromasters are. And that was by accident. I don't know if y'all are familiar with some other inventions that it just kind of happened, like the 3M Post-it note, sticky note. That was an accident. Well, this is also that exact same story. We, by accident, came up with a design that allowed it to use a lot less horsepower. That translates to less breakdown, less fuel, and happy customers. Thank you so much, Nelson. I would like to have Kelly open this thing up for a question. Then we'll close it officially. We can stay on after that, but Kelly, can you open this up or instruct people on what to do?
Sure. So if you would like to ask a question, press star 1, and that will unmute you, and you can ask your question. Star 1. Yes, is there a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Walker. I'm calling from Emmett County Recycling in northern Michigan. I was wondering about the needed space between windrows to run your windrow turner. For a loader-operated compost facility, the recommended space between windrows is 25 feet. With this compost windrow turner, is it 8 feet or larger?
Yeah, I will also allow, Nelson, I was going to ask you to also comment, but let me just first say that we tell our customers that we would like to have 12 feet as minimum. It's not so much the configuration on the pad as it is how many cubic yards or tons you process in a given time frame. Let's say for every 6 months, how much can you process? Well, that's more about throughput than the actual amount of volume sitting on the floor. But Nelson, can you just add to that?
Yeah, Edwin basically said it's about put through, right? Like that's kind of a big deal. The one thing that I've learned with if let's say you put two rows side by side, I typically do 10 feet, 12 feet when the truck unloads. 8 feet wide, it's going to pour it out, and then I just literally, again, we're talking about saving and not having to run a loader as much. I just unload in a row and run the turner right through it. Now, you can essentially marry 2 rows next to each other, and then when you get to the end, you can make a perfect turn right back into that same row, not having to go in between. But if you have 10 rows or 15 rows, depending on how big your yard is, I would agree with Edwin. 10 to 12 feet is sufficient.
Thank you.
But Nelson, you did mention that correctly, that they can be mated so that there's only like 4 feet or 3 feet, something like that. But listen, that was an excellent question. Nelson, I cannot thank you enough for being on the call with us. It's nothing like having just simply another customer tell others what this really is like, and that is extremely valuable. So, Kelly, I'll look to you to kind of take this off. Thank you, everyone, for joining us officially. We'll take it off the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.